So the name of the meetup group that I decided to attend was Coding Dojo Oakland. On the slide, I have the URL to the homepage for the meetup or the group. And the title of the event was called Intro to Programming with HTML CSS with Vincent Iono. The event was located at 426 17th Street, Suite 400 in Oakland, California. The meeting that I attended was on November 7th from 6 to 9 p.m. But the Coding Dojo does have multiple events every month. For the Intro to Programming with HTML, it's usually on Thursdays, but they do have like other events for like campus walkthrough and just resources. And during the meetup, there were several presenters that discussed during the time. So the most notable ones were Ben Jones. Next presenter was Chris Hughes. Another one was Eduardo Bayek. And another notable presenter was David Chenoin. So each one talked about something different. So Ben Jones, he was the career service manager. He was talking about like what resources the Coding Dojo provides once you join the bootcamp program. Like he helps out with creating resumes, building portfolios, and finding jobs. And Chris Hughes, he was the lead assistant for the Coding Dojo. Pretty much, he just went over what it's like to code in HTML and CSS and like what the basic rules are, how it's used. And Eduardo Bayek, he was the lead instructor at the Coding Dojo. So like after Chris Hughes gave his presentation of what HTML and CSS is, he gave us like a programming assignment to work with HTML and CSS, like to style a web page and how to format things around. And the last presenter that was notable was David Chenoin. He was the program's success manager. He gave like basic information on the financial aid, how to pay for the boot camp, and what possible methods you could use. After the presentation was over, I did go up to several of the presenters and ask them several questions about what to expect. So the first person I talked to was Eduardo Baik. I asked him like what his role was specifically. He told me that he was a lead instructor for the Coding Dojo, and what I could expect, like or what anybody could expect from him. He makes sure they just teach the students that are part of the program how to program in HTML, CSS, how to be comfortable, and challenges them so that they could be prepared for a possible future in the industry. And the next person I talked to as well was David Chenoin. I asked him several questions about um, like how much it cost, and it is kind of costly. It costs like almost $14,000 to join the boot camp. But he's saying that the boot camp does like have a track record that helps out with finding opportunities for its attendees or people that are part of the program, and there are a lot of services to help pay for the boot camp, such as like financial aid with scholarship that they offer. And after talking to him, he did say like there are several opportunities, such as like finding jobs like in web developing or working in database management, but there could even be like other opportunities like in the future, like doing for game development. So there is a lot of options that the Coding Dojo could help out with in the future. So overall, like I did get a good overall impression of the program or the boot camp. They were like a very descriptive. They were helpful. They kind of give like a good overview of what to expect and what will be learned. So for this boot camp, they focus specifically on HTML styling and CSS styling. So they, I had an overall good impression. The only thing is, I do not see myself attending another meetup with Coding Dojo Oakland, because like I was saying before, in order to like progress with the group, you do have to join their boot camp. And at the moment, it's not really relevant or it doesn't make sense because I am a full-time student. It's a lot of money, so it doesn't really work with my schedule, my time, and with the resources that I have at the moment. But the meetup was a good experience, and I do see myself joining other meetup groups to like get connections, meet up with people, find out what's going on. For the on-campus event, I decided to attend the Life and Work in Blockchain. The event happened on October 29th, which was a Tuesday, from 12:15 to 1:15 p.m., and it happened at the North Science Building in room 220. So before the meeting even began, Michael Gasioriak, which was a speaker, gave like a brief overview of his life and how he got to the point where he is now. So when he was born in Poland, and his parents moved over here when he was still like a child over to the United States in order to like to find a better life with better opportunities. So he grew up in New York, and he did have several jobs. So at first he was like a lawyer working at a firm, writing papers, but then he found out, that that wasn't for him. So that's when he started becoming a programmer. He was working at several startup companies to the point where he got to where he is now, where he is the CEO of the Truth Cartel. And from the meeting, he explained that the Truth Cartel is like a startup company that he helped create, which pretty much helps out other startup companies, um, like advertise themselves to let themselves know to the market that they're aiming as to what the product is, as in order to build hype. After Michael gave his brief overview of his life story, he began the meeting or the presentation by talking about what marketing and what he recommends in order to start in creating a startup company as marketing wise. So there are several things that he outlined as to what to avoid. So first off, he talked about that the most important thing is always find a group of people with like-minded ideas, because it doesn't matter like how talented people are or the group that you have is. Like if you have different opinions or you don't mesh well, the startup company is not going to happen because there's too much conflicts of interest. Another thing that he talked about when starting to create a startup is that since during the beginning stages you don't really have a product yet, um, the struggle is going to be trying to sell the idea to the market that you're aiming. So so pretty much it becomes a game of like having to create like a good idea and building hype around it. So he like emphasizes that when doing a startup, you have to create hype and you have to sell a good idea to investors or your possible market, or else even if you do have like a good idea, if you don't know how to sell it, it's not going to get traction. And that's from what he's experienced. This has been the main problem, which has caused like a lot of startup companies with good ideas to never take off or become successful. As for the second half of the presentation, Michael spoke about what blockchain is. So blockchain is pretty much like a collection of data online, kind of like a spreadsheet, and it always keeps updating. So it's kind of like a network, which is the reason. So since it is a network, it can be pretty costly to maintain, which is like why a lot of companies still aren't using blockchains. And also, from what I understood from blockchains, like it could be used as an alternative to physical currency. So, for example, like an example of a blockchain is Bitcoin, which is like a digital currency which could only be used online. So overall, I got like a good overview of what blockchain is and what some ideas or what some things are that you want to avoid and what some things are that you do want to implement when trying to create a startup company. So overall, it was a good meeting. Now to move on to the next part of my PowerPoint, I will now start talking about the Stack Overflow question that I decided to research. So the one that I found interesting, which relates to my to a class that I'm currently taking, is when should you use a class versus a struct in C++? And this is closely related to my data structures class. And the answer that I found, as you can see from the slide, is that the differences are that um, classes and a struct, they both use like member data functions, but the main difference is that structures or structs, the members are public, while class, they have like a private member functions that could only be used within the class. And as I was saying before, this is closely related to my data structures classes, because for most of my assignments, if not all, I've been using class and structures interchangeably. And for example, I've been creating linked lists, hash tables, binary search trees, hash tables with binary search trees, even like a dictionary class. And currently I'm working on finishing a boggle game. So I have used structures and classes interchangeably, and this they have been very useful for completing my programs. Lastly, to move on to the last part of the PowerPoint presentation, as you can see from the slide, I created a GitHub account with my profile being here, And what I learned from GitHub is that it's a code hosting platform that allows GitHub users to work together and collaborate on projects without actually having to be physically present. And it has like several features like repositories, branches, commits, pull requests. So GitHub, it's very useful like if you're working on projects such as like you're working on a game, and you have several people working on different parts of the game, and let's say for instance you're trying to split up your project in several different uh, pieces so that you won't accidentally change something by accident. GitHub is pretty useful because they do have like features such as like branches, which lets you work on a separate part of the master program in order to make edits. And then after, when you're done, you could like commit and then put a request in order to link it to the master branch. And with this, this concludes my my presentation.